Randi Weingarten, come on up.
Not wearing my mask to speak. I've been having asthma all day, so my apologies for not wearing my mask to speak. But I just tested negative. I'm okay. And
So for those
hybrid.
So hybrid people hear you best through the mic.
Okay, so this way I don't move around.
Or you can unmute. Yeah, look. There you go.
Okay, I'm going to try not to move around so I can see hybrid. I do not understand how anyone could have taught in this way. I mean, you know, this is in some ways, to do it this way is important, but it's kind of like performative art when we do it. Oh, so you can't see my...
Thank you.
That's a lot of work.
I know. Right, I'm cheesy. It probably was the worst of all the things that happened in the pandemic. Probably hybrid was the worst. But at the same time, having it available for something like this is good. But at the same time, it's hard to talk to all of you and to talk to all of you at the same time and try to be engaged in both ways. And that's what made, sorry, you can hear my stuffiness. That's what, part of what made last year so hard. Now, I said to you, I was here a few months ago, and I said that this year was going to be harder than last year. Do you remember me saying that? And has this year been harder than last year?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to, we're here today because we're in Santa Fe, and the governor signed 4 pretty major bills in terms of education. And people will get significant raises as a result of it. Not nearly what anybody is worth, but pretty significant in terms of what is going on around the rest of the country. And I was just on a phone call with about 20,000 of our colleagues, listening to, we did a teletown hall because there are 6 districts that are about to go on strike in the next 2 weeks. 3 in Illinois and 2 districts in Minnesota, but 2, the ESPs and the teachers are like 2 chapters within Minnesota. So we had 6 leaders on. And what we're trying to do is bring to everyone else in the union a sense of what is going on in other places. From the smallest union, which is Proviso, with 280 teachers in the suburbs of Chicago, to the largest, which was Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I told them why I was here today. And why, even with, and I think about it, and I said this earlier, I remember Susanna. You remember Susanna. Oh, Susanna and Hannah. These are really hard issues that we're dealing with now because it's the once-in-a-century pandemic that no one had the muscle to deal with. And America always believes in its own exceptionalism. And part of the exceptionalism right now is to be able to say, wait a second, how come this wasn't over in 2.5 minutes, and how come I've had to struggle for all this time? And unfortunately, America, in its exceptionalism, either thinks that everything is great or everything is terrible. And when everything is terrible, then there's a lot of blaming and shaming that goes on. And what happens when there's a lot of blaming and shaming? It's the people who are closest to everyone else who gets blamed and shamed. And that's why this year has been so much worse than last year. Because you have worked, and our members have worked, as hard as anybody could possibly work right now. And have had the stress and strain that everybody else has had in terms of your own families, as well as kids in your classrooms. And I just heard, Ellen talk about how because of the huge, and it is pretty huge, around the country, there's about a 10 to 20% decrease in the number of kids who are in schools. This is not all kids going to charters. This is a lot of kids just dropping out, and we don't know where they are. And some of it is homeschooling, and some of it is just the level of disruption. Think about it. We've never been through this. We don't know how to handle this. The only time that we have been through something like this would have been people in Hawaii going through Pearl Harbor, people in New York City going through 9/11. People have gone through the fires and the this and the that, and then having nothing left, and then having X number of weeks of no school. And this was not X number of weeks of no school. This was essentially 2 years of, are we in? Are we out? Are we hybrid? Are we having masks? Are we not? I mean, and who's dying? Who isn't dying? And who's sick? And who isn't sick? And then on top of all of that, I'm just taking a mirror to say this has been hard. It's really been hard. And on top of all of that, because this would have been hard enough. It would have been hard enough in terms of dealing with the effects of anxiety. It would have been hard enough in terms of dealing with not having enough community schools, not having enough guidance counselors, not having enough wraparound services. It would have been hard enough dealing with the effects of poverty. But then on top of it, and you just went through it in terms of your school board. This is not the normal. This is not Hannah and Susanna. This is a much deeper divide that's going on now. Because this divide, and you can hopefully, I hate to say this, but hopefully, what's happening in Ukraine will be a moment that helps people be centered about what's important and what isn't. Because this divide, people talked about this as freedom, wearing or not wearing. I don't mean to be gross here, but freedom is what the Ukrainians are doing right now in fighting for their democracy, and fighting against autocracy, and fighting against dictatorship, and being willing, civilians, to die for that proposition. That's freedom. We're in the middle of, and I'm really glad that Biden is the president now, because there's not a whole lot of other people in the United States who have the kind of empathy that he has, as well as the deep political experience. Notice, after NATO was like on this, and I almost never talk about this. I'm always talking about domestic issues, not foreign policy issues. But when Trump left, NATO was almost in disrepair. And we've never seen Europe and America, Canada, the Western democracies actually stand up for something like democratic principles of a country not being invaded by another country and not being attacked in that way. So I hope, and you know, we are helping. We've had emergency calls with our Education International partners. We had an executive council last week that Kathy was at. We put one of the first statements out about Ukraine. We just gave the Ukrainian refugees communities about $10,000 through the EEI, and we will do more. I was in Ukraine in 2013 as part of the Solidarity Mission when they gained their independence, and we will do more and more, I promise you that. Think about what the other side has done here. They've taken words like freedom, and you saw this in the meeting, in the fight on the school board. They've taken words like freedom. They've taken words like liberty. They've taken the anger and the anxiety that everybody has felt because we've never, ever been through something like this in modern history. And they're using it to actually defund, destabilize, and privatize public school. And if there's something that you remember about what I say right now, remember that all of what is going on in the outside world on this is intentional. So this stuff would be hard for us anyway. A pandemic of this proportion and trying to get kids to a social, emotional, academic recovery would be hard anyway. In the best schools in Albuquerque. And then you take on top of that all of this bullshit. So what's the antidote? The most important antidote, and this is going to sound crazy, the most important antidote is for us not only to be unified, but to fight for what's right, and to be the aspiration agents. And if you saw some of the polling that we did over the course, we did a really, really, really deep dive into what was going on right now with parents in November and December. And spoiler alert, they love you. And no, it doesn't feel that way. And maybe you should stop looking at Twitter and Facebook. Or do what I now do, which is the only people who can reply to me are the ones who I follow. I'll give you just 4 stats. 72% of parents, and we did, the parent polling we did, was all registered, was parents who were registered voters, and we skewed it Republican conservative. So it was 50% people who voted for Trump and 50% of people who voted for Biden, even though Biden got 8 million more votes than Trump. It was, we deep dived into white suburban communities, we deep dived into black and brown communities, into Hispanic communities. We did all of this to really get a deep dive, and we did focus groups as well. And we did it with pollsters who are normally very active. 72% of parents in America, this is December, like or love their public schools for their kids. 78% of parents in America like or love their public school teachers. 80% of parents in America believe that their public school teachers and paraprofessionals did everything they could to help their kids. 78% of parents in America believe that schools opened just about the right way. Only 22% thought that they didn't, and 49 to 17 believe that unions are part of the solution, not part of the problem, and that has grown by 20 points since 2014. Yeah. I'm just giving you a reality check. But what has happened? That's not what you hear on Fox. That's not what you hear in terms of factionalism. What's really going on? What's really going on is the world is changing. Forget about COVID. It's becoming more black and brown. And the people who have power don't want to lose power. And so what has happened is the things that give regular people real power, voting, labor, public education, They're not only going after it, but it's the kind of factionalism that happened in terms of the Civil War. So, why do I say we're the antidotes? We're the antidotes. Because at the end of the day, people need to have hope. Everything is always looked at through hope and fear, or through aspiration, or through change. People need and want hope. You are that hope. And they understand that. And people in America understand that unions are important to them too. So what does that mean for us? It means that we have to take on the issues that we have to take on in schooling. It means that we have to fight to get the guidance counselors and the social workers and the curriculum that we need, and fight against the testing, and fight all of that stuff. And those are virtuous fights, and those are righteous fights, and those are fights that we should take on. And it also means that we should actually take a deep breath and not listen to some of the bullshit that we hear. Because that anger is intended to create more anger. What creates more factionalism, more division? There's two things that people who want autocracy use more than anything else. Conspiracy theories, and these days, the anger of social media. So, all I'm saying to you, your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged into a power outlet.
I got
All I'm saying, no problem. I normally don't look at that, so, but I was trying, but all I'm saying is this. That $10,000 raise for all 3 tiers of educators, not one Republican voted against that in the legislature. What does that say to me? It says to me that in New Mexico, even with all that what is going on, that people understand the importance of the shortages, that people understand the importance of education, that people understand the importance of having people like you in classrooms, and that it matters. What do we need to do? We need to find the issues that actually people care about, which is essentially every single issue you advocate for. Take 1 or 2 or 3 of them and just push at it. Work with parents on it and just push at it. Whether it is the Reading Opens the World that we're doing, which is an antidote to book banning, whether it's any of the other issues that you're working on, trust me on this. People want to get their lives back. Schooling is how we heal and recover. It's why the other side is trying to make it chaotic and trying to keep the division. You are the antidote to that. And if we fight for a better life, the way I know we can, we will win these elections in November. And equally important to that, frankly more important to that, we will keep our democracy. And we will do what we need to do to lift and have a better life for you. It's a really tough, horrible time. And asking you to do more in a moment after all of this is pretty awful. But we need the democracy that we have inherited from our moms and our dads and our forefathers. We need to make sure this world is one that treats children right. And we're going to fight those assholes, sorry for cursing, who try to blame shames for doing the work to try to create opportunity and justice in this world. We're on the right path, and we are going to win this fight through aspiration, through justice, and through hope, fight, and caring. Thank you.
And I know that it's the end of a very long day, and you're probably going to go off to your Biden and do your important work responding to his State of the Union address. So the time you spent with us, we are so honored, Randy. Thank you. Thank you.
And, spoiler alert, watch Joe Biden's box tonight. One of our members is sitting with her. A nurse from Ohio.
Woo, nurses! Woo!